Welcome to another edition of the Social Gambler Radio Hour. I'm John Arnette. Good to have you with us today on a Friday afternoon. If you're driving home from work, probably a good feeling. Whole weekend ahead of you. Glad you're with us. Lots to talk about today. Lots going on in the sports world. 794-9001. If you'd like to get aboard, 794-9001. We are brought to you by thesocialgambler.com. Your leader in free sports picks, news, and reviews. Plenty of fresh content up on the Social Gambler again today, and now video podcasts of this show. Like I told you yesterday, if you want to see why the ladies have always said I have the face for radio, you can check out video podcasts of this show on thesocialgambler.com. Those guys who run the Social Gambler, I know they're just doing that to give me a hard time. Of course, I have nobody else to blame for the camera nobody else but myself to blame for the camera placement. Showcasing my double chin. Anyway, like I said, good to have you with us. If you're not listening to us on ESPN 1420, St. Augustine's sports leader, we can be heard via the Listen Live link on 1420sports.com or thesocialgambler.com. So no excuse for not hearing us no matter where you are. Like I said, if you want to join the show, 794-9001 is how you do that. Big upset at Wimbledon today. It's hard to say that Roger Federer winning a tennis match at Wimbledon is an upset. We talked about those odds yesterday. Federer was plus 200. 2-1 on your money. If you wanted to bet on Roger Federer to beat Novak Djokovic, which he did today. First time that those two had faced each other at Wimbledon, I was wrong on that. I thought that Federer had upset Djokovic at Wimbledon last year. It was the French. In French semis, Federer upset Djokovic, only to lose to Nadal in a great match. But Federer did beat Djokovic today. Like we said, Djokovic heavily favored, did not matter. Federer won in 4 sets. The crowd, I saw a little bit of it, about half of it. The crowd was really, really pro-Federer, which seemed to sort of not fluster Djokovic, but it didn't seem like he was in his normal rhythm of dominating. Seems like every time I watch Djokovic over the last 2 or 3 years, he's up 2 sets love or 2 sets won and a break in the next set. He is out of the tournament now, though, and Federer will face Andy Murray in the finals. Now, this is significant. Everybody's making a big deal out of it because it's the first time in 74 years a Brit. And yesterday I said I was confused on whether people from Scotland were actually British. I thought they might be British, not English, but British, and that's true, they are. Curious to know how people from Scotland feel about that, being labeled British. Are you proud of that, or is that sort of a little irritant? I mean, I know, I watched the movie Braveheart, right? So Scotland's tried to gain independence from England before. I know they have some form of independence. But if they're part of the United Kingdom, and so what, are they ruled by the British Parliament? Isn't that in England? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not a world historian here. But anyway, Murray, a British man, the first British man in the finals in 74 years. Haven't had a British man win it in 76 years, so I guess there was a run back there in the 30s. There were some good English tennis players, by God. At least one, anyway. Been quite a while since then, though. Now, Andy Murray sort of grunted and pouted his way to a 4-set win over Wilfried Tsonga. And, Murray, to me, is unlikable. He's hard to really root for. And I have reason to root for him. His coach, Yvonne Lendl, Hall of Fame tennis player, one of the greats of all time. I happen to know Yvonne Lendl. As luck would have it, my father is a golf pro in Vero Beach, Florida, where I went to high school. Born and raised up in the Jacksonville area. Moved down to Vero Beach when Dad took a job there in high school. Anyway, Dad's been there for 15 years. Yvonne Lendl lives at that golf course, so I've played probably a couple of 100 rounds of golf with him. He's been kind enough to have me as guest at his house, my wife and I, up there in Connecticut, where he lives during the summer. up there traveling. So he's, as much of a friend of mine as a guy who's 20 years older than you and, is a Hall of Fame tennis player can be, I guess. Know him fairly well. So I root for Andy Murray. I try. It's hard, though. The guy, just do not like his attitude. He's a head hanger. Always looks like, the whole world is against him. It's so tough doing what he has to do. I've heard this too many times this week. The weight of England is on his shoulders. The weight, come on. It's a tennis match, please. He loses all the time at Wimbledon. How much weight can there be at his shoulders? He's lost every time he's ever played. Never gotten this far. Never gotten to the finals, obviously. So he always loses eventually. How much pressure can there be? Another back-breaking loss. Just like last year and the year before. But he acts like, the weight of the world is on his shoulders. When things go wrong for him out there, it seems like it's some great tragedy. Because it seems like he sort of feels sorry for himself. I don't like that trait in athletes. That's difficult for me to root for. I remember the match at Wimbledon a couple of years ago, maybe it was last year, between John Isner and Nicholas Mahut. You might remember it because it was the longest match in Wimbledon history. Went an obscene amount of games in the fifth set. Remember, they don't play a tiebreaker in the fifth set at Wimbledon. So it was, however many games, 100 games or whatever were played in the final set. I don't remember exactly how many. But what I do remember is watching it. Like most people, when you watch an international sport like tennis, I tend to root, I guess, for the Americans. So I started off sort of rooting for John Isner. Guy went to University of Georgia. I'm no Georgia Bulldog fan, but SEC guy, American, playing a Frenchman, no less. I'm pretty sure Mahut's a Frenchman. When are you going to root for a Frenchman over a Georgia boy? People around this area, you're generally not going to do that. However, watching the match, over the course of the match, Isner had that, hang head, sort of feeling sorry for himself, and this is, woe is me, everything is happening wrong, I can't believe, while this other guy, Mahut, he kept his head up, stayed positive. Bad things were happening to him too, but you wouldn't know it, kept that positive attitude, and I tell you what, he lost. Mahut lost. But I found myself rooting for him. I was rooting for him for most of the match. And anyway, Andy Murray to me is hard to root for the same reason. I do crack up though looking at Ivan Lendl in the booth. He doesn't stand up and applaud when everybody else does. Just kind of sits there. And I've actually only seen him one time since he was working with Andy Murray. And I said, because Murray, has a reputation of not a very friendly guy, sort of a jerk. And I basically said that to Ivan. I said, heard you work with Andy Murray, heard he's a real jerk. And he said, we get along great. Because Ivan is the type of guy who would tell you that he is a sort of jerk and proud to be that way. Great sense of humor, though. We are going to have him on the show at one point. I told him, I said, now that you're relevant again, I'll have you on my little radio show, Believe me, he's the type of guy that once you've paid him a couple of times on the golf course, and he is a scratch golfer, very serious about golf. If you don't know this about Ivan Lendl, I remember when I first met him, I was 15 years old, and I was a pretty good player when I was 15. I'd average shooting mid-70s, and at a country club like Windsor, which is where Ivan lives, there's just not a whole lot of people who are shooting in the mid-70s from the men's tees. Ivan is one of those people. He won the club championship. Now I think it's like 15 years in a row or something like that. But so anyways, he began playing a lot of golf with him. And I remember he used to say, and at this time he was in his 40s, and he would say his goal as a golfer was to be the best in the world. Not the best senior in the world, not the best. He wanted to be the best in the world, the best golfer in the world, and no one practiced harder. I guarantee you. Take the last 2 or 3 years out of it when he's been traveling a lot with his girls who are college golfers. Marika and Isabel play at Florida. Crash, his youngest, Daniela, she plays at Alabama. He's been traveling a lot with them to golf tournaments the last couple of years. Now this Andy Murray thing, getting into the tennis coaching. But take the 8 to 10 years prior to that, and I guarantee you there is not one man on the PGA Tour, Vijay Singh, whoever, who practiced golf any more than Ivan Lendl, spent any more hours on the range. The man was literally at the range, lived at a golf course, as I said, Windsor down there in Vero Beach in the winters. His golf course up in Connecticut in the summers was called Torrington. This is a man who is at the range 6:37 every morning. where he would practice for hours and then play either 18 or 36 every day. He has people, good players that he knows from Orlando down to Palm Beach who drive in to play with him. I remember every time, I'd play with Yvonne, even coming back in college, because, my dad was still and is still, by the way, employed at Windsor. Coming back from college, you'd play with him and he'd have a different guy every day. Play with a wide variety of guys playing with this guy. My point is, he is very serious about what he does. Him training his girls, who, as I said, all three now play golf in the SEC. I believe Marika just graduated, actually. I believe last year was her senior year at Florida. But him coaching his girls is close to child labor. I mean, he forced these girls to practice. Listen, if you don't think making a sport not fun for a kid, forcing a kid to play a sport, if you think that's not good, this is not the right guy for you. And if you don't think that forcing a kid to play a sport every day for hours on end does not turn kids into extremely good at that sport, whether they love it or not, I have evidence to the contrary. Because let me tell you, his girls would practice as much as he did. A lot of times, many times I would hear one of his girls say, well, can I go in now? Can I go in now? No. A couple of more hours. He would drive by. You'd see one of his girls with a huge stack of balls poured out 35 feet from the hole, hitting 35-footers. He would drive by in the cart. Obviously, there were a couple holes, number 2 and number 8 at Windsor. Go right up sort of near the putting green. He would drive by and say, how many have you made? They were looking, they would say 17. He would say, you can quit when you made 35. Now making 35-footers, or I'm just pulling in there, making 35 40-footers, I guess I used it wrong. Obviously, the number 35 is foremost in my mind right now, just running that off the top of my head. But making so many putts from a long distance takes a long time. I mean, these girls would sit out there for hours and hours and hours. Days all few and far between. But anyway, I'm getting a little more into it than I intended, but I'm not surprised at the coaching, if you call it. I'm interested. I would love to be a fly on the wall when Lindell and Andy Murray have their coaching sessions, because nobody's more direct, blunt, and honest than Yvonne Lindell. And I'm sure he tells them things he doesn't want to hear. Another quick story about that. I started the story, as I'll get into it. Went to the Greater Hartford Open with Lindell one year because his friend Mike Sposa was playing. Mike Sposa, a pro who's played on tour for a couple of years, played more years than that on the nationwide tour. Not sure he's playing anymore. I think he might have a pros job somewhere, a club pros job, that is. Sposa's probably in his 40s now. This was about 5 or 6 years ago. Happened to be staying at Lindell's house because I was traveling, staying there for a couple of days during the Greater Hartford Open, and we went. As I said, he's friends with Sposa. Now, we watched Sposa play. I'll never forget, he shot 3 under, which, the scores were pretty low at the Hartford Open, but still, 3 under is a good, solid round. I was impressed, by his play. Obviously, follow a guy around 18 holes, watch him shoot 3 under. That's impressive. So we're walking away from the 18th green. He sort of lifts up the rope for us. We sort of step behind the rope here. He asks Yvonne, well, what'd you think? It's he and his caddy, Mike Sposa and his caddy. That's the wrong thing to ask Yvonne. Yvonne opened he was carrying one of those chairs with the spike on the bottom. Opened his little chair, sat on it, and I said, well, I'll tell you what I think. I don't like the way you play at all. And he goes into about 5 or 10 minutes. Now, this is somebody who was a pro tennis player. Yvonne played tennis, obviously a Hall of Fame great, but this is a tour player who just shot 3 under in the Hartford Open, a tour event. Mike Sposa saying, well, what did you think? And Yvonne went on to tell him, how he didn't like the way he played at all. He said, you were above the hole 3 or 4 times. He said, I saw you with a 9-iron. You hit it 15 feet above the hole. You can't be aggressive with those putts. Obviously the greens out there were fast. Again, this is a guy who just shot 3 under. And Sposa kind of took it well. He kind of shrugged it off. But his caddy, you could tell. And by the way, now you're going to think I'm making this up. Look this up online. Now you're going to think I'm just getting into fantasy land here and making up things as I go. I'm really not. His caddy, because after this story, this is a sidetracking story, somebody said, do you recognize that guy? Mike Sposa's caddy was Jimmy Chitwood from the movie Hoosiers. Not making it up. That guy, that actor who played Jimmy Chitwood, went on to become a PGA Tour caddy, who was caddying for Mike Sposa that day. I swear, this sounds bizarre. This is true. There I was, Greater Hartford Open, Yvonne Lindell, Jimmy Chitwood, and Mike Sposa. Yvonne Lindell telling Sposa how he didn't like anything about the way he played golf, even though he just shot 3 under in a PGA Tour event. And his caddy, Jimmy Chitwood, I would come to find out after, was beginning to get agitated. You could tell this guy had just played well, and here was somebody saying he didn't like the way he plays. And his caddy said, hey, man, he sort of spit in there. Jimmy Chitwood said, hey, man, these guys are making birdies out here. Because Lindell was telling Sposa how he didn't like how aggressive he was being, going after some pins, putting it above the hole, when in Lindell's mind he should have been conservative, left the ball below the hole. So his caddy jumped in to defend Sposa and said, hey, man, these guys are making birdies out here. And Lindell, without missing a beat, said, that's why you're not winning. That's why you guys aren't winners. I mean, it was sort of, I'm sitting there, I'm the only guy, I'm like, here I am, a 25-year-old or whatever kid, however old I was at the time. And, I'm telling you, this guy is direct and blunt, and if Andy Murray is, and he's been known to be a pouter in the past and known to be a guy who lets past failures sort of get him down when tough things happen to him and in matches, that's been known to affect Andy Murray. A lot of people said that's one of the things been holding him back. I guarantee you Yvonne Lindell will tell him that as quick as you can snap a finger. As quick as you can snap a finger, he will say, well, you let that last point affect you. That's why you're not a winner. Because that's the way that guy is. But anyway, I just still, like I said, despite my relationship or whatever with Yvonne, I still can't bring myself to root for Andy Murray. He's just a hard guy to root for. When he won the match today, he looked irritated, like, kind of looked up at the sky like, God, that was torturous. Come on, man. You just won in the semis at Wimbledon. I'd rather see, it makes me a little uncomfortable to see grown men break down sobbing on national television. Not a big fan of that either. But I'd rather see that. Come on, go nuts. Fall on the ground, or, put your fists up in the air. I'd rather see that kind of relief. Not the, this is torturous. And you heard him in the post-match press conference. I know what's ahead of me. Roger Federer. Federer has beat Andy Murray like a drum for years. I guarantee you, Federer will be eating whatever he eats. I picture him eating like veal cutlets with some glass of red wine. I guarantee you, Federer is not going to even if there was one in England, which there's not, the local barbecue joint, Federer is not eating at Sonny's. Roger Federer, I guarantee you, whatever he eats tonight will be expensive. This is a guy who sort of is trying to craft his image in that direction. So he'll be sipping his fine whatever 100-year-old wine or whatever 100-year-old scotch tonight, laughing to himself about the prospect of facing Andy Murray tomorrow, who he chews up and spits out. Odds reflect that, of course. If you want to have a bet on the match, Federer at most offshore bookmakers right now, minus 215. That means you have to bet $215 to win 100, or $21.50 to win 1,000. If you like to roll a little bigger. If you'd like to back Roger Federer. Murray, almost 2-1 on your money, plus 165. Bet 100 to win 165. If you think Andy Murray is going to be able to do it. Of course, if minus 215 sounds like a big favorite to you, that is nothing compared to the women's draw. Finals in the women's draw where Serena Williams, minus 700 favorite over Agnieszka Radwanska. What makes this more curious, Serena is a 6 seed, and this girl she's playing in the finals is a 3 seed. Now, listen, I will admit, I'm not going to try to sound like, Mr. Expert here. I could not pick Radwanska out of a lineup. Not sure I have ever seen her strike a shot. And it's not that I'm not a tennis fan or don't watch tennis. I think I'm probably your definition of a casual tennis fan. Probably don't watch any of the Australian Open at all. Maybe a little bit of the finals some years. Watch a little bit of the French. Probably more than a little bit of Wimbledon. I'll definitely watch some of this Federer-Andy Murray match. I remember that classic Federer-Nadal Wimbledon finals match a few years ago that Nadal ended up winning. I watched all of that. that was great television. And, I watched some of the U.S. Open. So it's not that I'm not a tennis fan. I attended the U.S. Open one time. My wife, we happened to be in that area at the time, thought it'd be fun, so, I enjoy tennis. However, I guess even the casual tennis fan, a casual tennis fan like me, Agnieszka Radwanska, anybody know? if we can get a picture on her, give me a 1 to 10 scale. Because if you don't listen to this show, you might not know that I do base my rooting interest, in women's sports. It's based on looks. I admit that. Serena Williams, not very high up there on my look scale. No. A beast of a woman. Oh, she is big, man. I'm telling you. You seen those? I mean, I won't go any further. Don't want to get myself in trouble here.
I'll put her arms up against my legs as far as muscle mass.
Man, I was going to talk about her thighs, but you're right about her arms. I mean, I've seen her from time to time, man. Actually, it's funny. I used to have a friend of mine, who's still a friend of mine. I just haven't seen him in a few years. But he used to think Serena Williams was attractive. And he would say, now, full disclosure, he was a black fella, was African-American or whatever you want to call it, my buddy. But he thought Serena Williams was attractive. Now, this was so troubling. I ended up, a couple of pictures that I saw. Now, back when she wasn't quite as flabby, when she had sort of a six-pack and the huge thighs and the muscular arms that Pete's talking about, probably when she was on the juice, looking back at it, when every other athlete was on the juice, world-class athlete. But I remember telling my friend, I really believed it. If you think Serena Williams is really attractive, I'm sorry, I believe you have at least a trace of homosexuality in you. I think that's the case. I'm sorry. If what sort of turns you on is, those muscles and like, ooh, yeah, she's big, she looks like she could beat me in an arm wrestling contest. If that's the type of thing for you, aren't you a little gay? Maybe? No? I don't know. Maybe not. We're going to go to a quick break on that note. 794-9001. We're going to open up the phone lines in the next segment. I'm John Arnette, and this is the Social Gambler Radio Hour.
Nothing says love like Italian food, so don't take her to a generic big chain Italian.
Welcome back to the Social Gambler Radio Hour. I'm John Arnette. Good to have you with us today on a Friday. Probably feels good to be getting off work if that's what you're doing. If you'd like to join the program, 794-9001 is how you do that. Ladies, Pete Melfi is waiting to take your calls. Again, the most surefire way that I can think of to get a hold of Pete Melfi. Ladies, if you've been calling him and he's been avoiding your cell phone calls, not her again, baby mama number 4. He can't avoid him in here because there's no caller ID, you see?
What are you making me out to be here? Baby mama number 4? Jeez, man. Who do you think I am, John Arnette? I'm not one of these professional athletes, man.
Right, and Antonio Cromartie. Right, I got you. Okay, allegedly, he's not one of these professional athletes, though he is a sunglasses indoors person. Pete endorses the sunglasses indoors. As a matter of fact, sometimes he wears sunglasses indoors walking in, and, I understand that outside, but about a half hour ago, which is why I just thought about this right now, just popped in my head, he was sitting here with no sunglasses in our little broom closet here, and then he picked up the sunglasses and put them on.
And what was I going to do?
I was like, I guess he was
going outside.
Going outside to kill himself slowly. But, sunglasses, a sunglass indoors person, that's a little bit better. To me, the guy at the poker room who wears sunglasses, and listen, I play poker, I go to the local poker rooms around here. You might have seen me there if you go up there. The sunglass guy in the poker room, look, buddy, that $25 bet, what do you think? I'm looking at you, see if your pupils, love that guy who throws a $25 bet out there with a grim face on, wearing those sunglasses like, ooh, you got me now on the steely stare. Maybe you scared me off a call, and listen, if I have the cards, I'm going to call you, I'm going to raise you, whatever. If I don't have the cards, I'm going to fold. Doesn't matter that you're wearing mirror sunglasses like the Highway Patrol.
How many people are sitting around one of those tables? Is it like 8 or 12?
Yeah, it's like 10.
The last time I was
10,
there, it was a while ago. But yeah, and it's like now 6 out of 10 of them are all in sunglasses and hats.
You do see some guys in sunglasses.
And you see a lot.
And it's like, please, man. Okay, if you're a guy on TV, if you're betting hundreds of thousands of dollars and you have a TV camera trained on you, and, some of those guys, I guess they're probably a little nervous. Okay, whatever. If you need to do that, But, dude, it's pathetic if you're at the poker room playing your 2-5 no-limit game or your 2-2 no-limit game or whatever you play, throwing out $30 and $40 bets. I mean, so what? You're telling me you can't control yourself over $30?
Just way too excited.
Well, why are
I
you
could
at the
double
poker
this
room?
$30 right now.
Right, exactly. You know, like, okay. There you go. All in, $65. Throw on the sunglasses. Well, if it weren't for the sunglasses, and sometimes I'll even say that if I'm feeling salty. I've gotten some dirty looks, but I'll say, well, if it weren't for the sunglasses, I would have called, you know.
They make all the difference, man.
Anyway, moving on now to actual sports. That is what we get to here on the Social Gambler Radio Hour. If you'd like to join the show, 794-9001 is how you do that. We are brought to you by thesocialgambler.com, your leader in free sports picks, news, and reviews. As always, plenty of free, fresh content on the Social Gambler today. Some Wimbledon stuff, some European sports. Canadian Football League. You know it's a slow point in the sports year when we start breaking down the Canadian Football League. Either that or you are on, let's say, I was going to say compulsive, let's say an avid gambler. Because there's nothing wrong with being an avid anything, right? If you're interested in gambling on the Canadian Football League, full breakdown of that on thesocialgambler.com. And then I will say that you're an avid gambler. There are a few other words, compulsive, degenerate. Those don't sound quite as good. Anyway, if you're interested in betting on the Canadian Football League or on this Wimbledon tennis match tomorrow, hey, you think Murray's going to beat Federer? Do you think Radwanska, who's plus 425, over 4-1 on your money if you think Radwanska can beat Serena? Can we get a sex check on Serena, please? Have they one time given her an actual inspection? I want to know that. We did that disturbing segment before I left for the vacation on the transgender athlete. Wasn't that even... That was almost as bad as Sandusky to talk about, was it not, Pete?
It was tough.
I mean, but
it was tough. But it wasn't even. There wasn't even like somebody who went through the operation, right? It was somebody who just
that's
said,
the thing. The rules have now changed.
Yeah.
And just to get this clear, I would have never even talked about this except for I subscribe to Sports Illustrated, a sports magazine a whole lot of people subscribe to, and I was reading it on, let's say I was sitting in a chair reading it, and I ran into a 6-page segment entitled "The Transgender Athlete," and not saying like, isn't it disturbing? And by the way, if you don't know what transgender is, that is when you are factually a male or a female, yet you declare you are the other sex. And somehow we're supposed to recognize that as legitimate. I've always really been a woman, even though I have male sex organs. No, I don't think so. You are a male, all right? Listen, I am a white guy. I'm not Asian. I'm not black. If I try to apply for some sort of minority grant or scholarship or whatever, I should not be able to do that. Even though I've always been black on the inside, as my friends know. Whatever. Even if you feel like you've always been a woman, always been a man, always been black, always been Asian, always been white, you are what you are. If we start, respecting people's rights to say things that are blatantly false, where does it stop? And in this Sports Illustrated article, I didn't mean to get back into it now, God, but they have the story of this, 7 or 8-year-old kid who plays in a soccer league in Arizona, who is a boy. They call him Jazz or something in the article. A boy, but he plays in the girls' soccer league. Newsflash, he's MVP, by the way. Wonder how the rest of the parents of the league feel about that. MVP of the girls' soccer league, and the parents say, oh, yeah, he's just always been a girl at heart. Kid's not even old enough to know what he is. Kid, you are a boy. I don't care if you like the color pink. That does not mean you were born a girl. Really disturbs me. And by the way, the reason we talked about it, it's relevant. In 2011, the NCAA, they allow transgender athletes. And in 2011, they took away the requirement that you had to be post-operative. See, to me, if you're enough of a freak to actually have your manhood removed in an effort to become a woman, you're probably not going to be a top-class athlete. I mean, let's face it. How many top-class athletes, I know that guy, and that guy sort of, if you'd told me he attends Comic-Con, I might believe you. If you tell me that guy's a Division I caliber athlete, probably don't believe you. So to me, if you have to be a post-operative, well, okay. If you're going to take it that far, then I guess. But now, because of a variety of things, including insurance doesn't cover that, and it's an extreme expense. And the fact that, it hasn't proven to be safe. Shocker, if you remove your reproductive organs, which also, if you're a male, control your bladder, it might not be safe. But now the NCAA, as of 2011, has removed that as a requirement. That's right. And they even talked about it in the article. Some NCAA spokesman said, he calls it the third rail. He said, the third rail of this whole thing that we haven't seen yet is what about when the male, who's a male, by the way, has male sex organs, male hormones, when a male says, oh yeah, I'm a female, and plays a woman's sport and dominates. And all it's going to take is somebody who either puts their pride aside, or somebody who wants to become a story. I mean, you might be looked at as kind of a freak, but you'd be a story. I mean, picture some guy, because obviously there are no rules saying that girl athletes have to wear makeup or dresses, because most of them don't anyway. So why can't a guy be dressed just like a normal guy and say, yeah, that's right, give it a little smirk and say, I'm a woman. Yeah, always been a woman. Transgender, that's me. And just dominate, average 30 and 20 in women's college basketball, some big old guy. I mean, this is going to happen. If you think I'm painting some sort of farcical scenario, look it up. SI.com, The Transgender Athlete is the title of it. And Pete, how did I get talking about this for 10 minutes again?
Serena Williams.
Serena Williams! So you're right. Serena Williams is what got me talking about it.
This is what I want to know. Is it going to turn into a scenario where if this is going to be the standard, if you can be a man and get into women's sports, is it going to be in college like the men's team's going to be the varsity version and then the women's team's just going to be like the JV version of the guys who couldn't make the varsity squad?
I guess. Maybe. I mean, it's yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what's to stop the guys from, like you said, putting pride aside at the end of the school year? Oh, darn, Florida didn't want me on the men's team. Well, hey, guess what? I feel like maybe I'm a girl. Maybe I want to play for Florida anyway and get a free ride to college. I think I'm a girl now, so I'm going to go play for the women's team.
Exactly. What's to stop? Yeah, or some guy, so on the LPGA, and the LPGA was another, women's golf was a sport mentioned. The LPGA was specifically mentioned because it was a lawsuit against the LPGA by some quote-unquote, a person, I don't know, a man who was a police officer in California, now calls him/herself Lana Lawless and has long hair, wears lipstick and all. But anyway, he sued the LPGA for the right to compete. Well, he wasn't good enough because he was like a 2 handicap, so he wasn't good enough to compete at the Q school. And it was funny in the Sports Illustrated article, there was a bunch of sort of smug-sounding quotes from LPGA players saying, oh, yeah, if they're good enough, bring it. Oh, yeah, really? Really, LPGA player? If they're good enough, bring it. Let me tell you what. There are, on the LPGA, they play 6,300, 6,400, 6,500-yard courses. Men hit the ball much, much further than women. If you put a male professional on an LPGA course, they're hitting 6 and 7 irons into every single par 5. They're hitting chip wedge into every single par 4. When you look at something like the Hooters Tour, which is a mini tour, a golf mini tour, below the sort of sanctioned mini tour, which is now the Web.com mini tour, Web.com tour, formerly the Nationwide Tour. But the Hooters Tour, which is no more than organized gambling, if you have $1,200 for an entry fee, you put it up there and play against 150 other guys who put up their $1,200. If you took the top 100 guys on the money list of the Hooters Tour and you put any one of those guys on the LPGA, they are a millionaire. A millionaire. And that is no exaggeration. And so when's it going to take for one of these guys? It's going to happen any year now. I mean, after this Sports Illustrated thing, for one of those guys to say, wait a second, what am I doing? Yeah, sure, a couple of people will ridicule me. I'm sure I'll get a hard time in social media saying, what is this,
Should be a millionaire.
I'd be hated, and that might be the tough part. You'd be hated by the actual women on the tour. Gallery, even people probably be booing you, saying nasty things in the gallery. You wouldn't care. Laugh all the way to the bank, right? Anyway, you're right. Serena Williams got me talking about it, but right when I said that was such a disturbing thing to talk about, right up there with Jerry Sandusky, there we spent 10 minutes on it. And shocker, the phones haven't lit up. Pete and I always talk about it. It's funny, when you work at a radio station, a local radio station, you really get a feel for topics that generate interest and topics that, what are people going to talk, what are people going to call in about? When we start talking football, when we start talking, Tim Tebow. We like talking Tim Tebow from this area. Big story. When we start talking Jaguars sometimes, Gene Smith sometimes.
The phone just lit up twice when you said Tebow.
Yeah, that's right. People like that. When you talk Jerry Sandusky, when you talk NBA basketball, when you talk the transgender athlete, and it's not that I guess there aren't people, just, what are you going to say? Anyway, we're going to move on now to some NFL football. Get me away from Serena Williams, even though Serena Williams, hey, if you said, what woman's athlete has the best chance to play in the NFL, is there really any question? Is there even a second? I'll tell you, Pete, off the top of your head, who's second? Who's second? What female athlete has the best chance to play in the NFL? Bam, top of your head. Who's second?
Venus Williams?
I don't know.
I don't know.
I was flipping through this past weekend. There was softball on ESPN. It's a slow time of the year when women's softball's on ESPN. But there was some sort of pitcher. I don't know. And she was a tank of a girl. And I'm telling you, I say that in a good way. I'm not, she was doing her thing. She was pitching on ESPN. I've never done anything athletically on ESPN. So that's a more power to her, Big is beautiful. Okay, I get it. I'm not being mean or anything, but she was a tank. She looked like she might have had a future in the NFL, maybe. The Lingerie Football League. She was mowing down those other girls, I tell you what. She was setting them up and she was mowing them down. You probably know, if anybody's listening, somebody knows the girl I'm talking about, because it was just on this past weekend. Maybe she pitches for Oklahoma or something. I want to say Oklahoma. Anyway, wanted to get to this yesterday. The NFL changed a rule that sort of could have a significant impact to fans in this area. Now, I know over the last couple of years, the Jags haven't had a blackout. Believe me, I know. I was sick of, just like everybody else was, sick of the area being sort of the butt of national jokes because of the blackouts. The LA Jags, when is this team going to move? When were we having all the blackouts 3 and 4 years ago? So it's great that we haven't had it in the last couple of years. Still, we've been really close to a couple. We've had to have Wayne Weaver bail us out by buying tickets a couple of times. Still haven't had a sellout in the last couple of years, which is sort of painful. Still have tarps covering seats. Painful. But hey, you don't want to see games blacked out on local television. I'm sorry, that is it's just bad for the franchise. Right? If your little kids can't watch the team on television, you don't have little kids who are fans of the team. They're irrelevant enough. The only people who care about them are in this area. So we like to have them on TV. Well, because of a change in the NFL rules, blackouts could be a thing of the past here in Jacksonville. Before, you had to sell 100% of your non-premium seats. The Jags number was almost 51,000 that we had to meet every Sunday not to have a blackout. Well, now the NFL's changed the rule. Now, the language gets a little complex maybe. But basically, if a team wants to, they can take it all the way down to you only need 85% of non-premium seats sold to avoid a blackout. So for the Jags, that would take that number down to 43,400. Now, even in the past when we've had blackouts, that it almost always falls between something like 43 or 44,000 and 51,000. We would have almost never had a blackout if that number was as low as 43,400. Now, will it be that low? Because here's the catch. And so it'll be very interesting to see what Shad Khan, what Mark Lamping decide to do, what the Jags are going to do as it relates to this. Teams can set it at whatever they want to. It's their own discretion. However, anything that you make in ticket sales over what you set it at, so if you set it as low as 85%, which is the lowest you can set it, and say you sell 100% of your non-premium seats, which all teams still want to do, anything, that 15% between 85 and 100, you have to divide equally between the rest of the league. Revenue sharing. So, now the Jaguars are going to be the beneficiary of some of that revenue sharing. When other teams sell tickets above their allotted number, whatever each team's allotted number is going to be, no doubt a couple of franchises are going to keep it at 100%. They don't have that problem. They have waiting lists some places. Not here. Not that we should. Hey, small market, big stadium. Jaguar fans, believe me, I've heard the excuses. I've made the excuses. I understand. What will Shad Khan set it at? My guess is 88, 89%. I think we will be one of the lowest numbers in the league, and we should be one of the smallest markets in the league. But that means, if the team can ever become good, if the team can ever become relevant, which we could have been saying that for 10 years, and it hasn't happened. But if the team ever becomes good and starts selling out, Shad Khan might have to divide some of that money. If he sets it again, and he's not going to set it 100%, he will have to divide some of that money amongst his competitors anytime he sells out. Anyway, we're going to go to the phones now. We have John off the line. John, if you want to call back, 794-9001. So I think it's a rule change that's good for the local fans. Let's face it, folks. Listen, I respect all you hardcore fans who are out there game in, game out. I've been in that stadium. It's really hot days. I've been a season ticket owner in the past. But in the middle of September in Jacksonville, Florida, it's more comfortable in your living room, 72 degrees, big flat screen. And here's something nobody else mentions. For big football fans like myself, maybe you, those 4 o'clock games, you want to watch those 4 o'clock games. I like to bet on these games a little bit. I might have significant interest financially in a 4 o'clock game. And if you go to the game, it really it's a whole day experience. You don't watch 4 o'clock games. You might watch the tail end of them, but you, of course, still get the Sunday night game, but really washes out the whole day of football. And, that's something, too. So, a hot September day can be 90 degrees in this area in September. Do you want to go sit and roast in that stadium to watch a team that, by the way, hasn't been very good in forever? Miss the afternoon games when you could be, kicking your feet up, soft drink, beer, what have you, watching the games at home. It's a legitimate question, legitimate deal. So, I think it's good that we're not going to be blacked out anymore. It's probably good for this area that number is lowered. I would like to know how Shad Khan feels about this. Is this a good or bad thing? Because this was an NFL ruling. This is an NFL mandate. The teams can do whatever they want now with this number. They can take it as low as 85% of non-premium tickets sold to avoid a blackout. This is the NFL's doing, not Shad Khan's doing. Now, Shad Khan gets to decide what the Jaguars' number is going to be. But I wonder if this is a good thing. I'd be interested in his feedback on that. Maybe we'll get him on the show right after we get Tiger Woods and Tim Tebow, just like we say. No, we did. We had a caller call us one day and say, well, we were talking about Shad Khan and say, well, why don't you get him on the show? Hey, love to have him on the show. Shad Khan, if you're listening, we're here every afternoon at 4. Social Gambler Radio Hour. We are going to go to a break now, a long overdue break. Pete's been giving me the evil eye for some time. 794-9001. If you'd like to get in on the other side, I'm John Arnette, and this is the Social Gambler Radio Hour.
Al James here. Join me Sunday mornings.
Welcome back to the Social Gambler Radio Hour. I'm John Arnette. 794-9001, the number if you'd like to get aboard today. Talk some sports, 794-9001. Your calls are always welcome. We are brought to you by thesocialgambler.com, your leader in free sports picks, news, and reviews. A reminder, everything on The Social Gambler is entirely free, and they're also an app for your smartphone. So be sure to check them out. And as I've told you before, you can get all your free advice from The Social Gambler, but the only place you can legally act on that advice here in Northeast Florida, the only legal sports book around, is the Jacks Are Better Casino, the casino ship that sails 9 times weekly, Wednesday through Sunday out of Mayport. They have full Vegas action out there at the Jacks Are Better, including a non-smoking deck, a smoking deck, outdoor area up top. Great staff out there. See Amadeo, casino host out there. He'll take good care of you. anytime you're going to go out there to the Jacks Are Better, be sure to mention this radio show, the Social Gambler Radio Hour, and they'll give you $10 free play. That's $10 you can use same as cash anywhere in the casino just for mentioning this radio show. So go out and see them at the Jacks Are Better. Now, in this frenzy, that has been NBA free agency, you know, most of the stories, Dwight Howard, the New Jersey Nets situation, obviously, that's gotten a lot of pub. The Steve Nash story, we led with that yesterday, as most people did. That was sort of a big deal. A two-time MVP, joining forces with Kobe Bryant, trying to win a championship before his career's over. One move in free agency has really slid under the radar, but I want to talk about it because it interests me. Brandon Roy, for those of you who don't know, Brandon Roy is a guy who came into the league with the Portland Trail Blazers, was one of the top young players in the NBA. I mean, really, Portland experienced sort of a resurgence when Roy was there. This is a guy who could play the 2 or 3, really versatile guy, defends, good shooter, good rebounder for his size. You know, he's 6'4", 6'5", but a good defender, a useful player. High percentage shooter, not a high volume shooter. Gets his teammates involved, good passer. Anyway, played 5 years in the league. 3 All-Star game appearances, averaged 19 points in those 5 years, 4 rebounds, 4 assists. Guy's a complete player. He retired last year because of chronic injury problems. Had bad knees, bad back. But it was just announced today that he's decided to come back and he's signed with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, the reason we know this was a genuine retirement and wasn't in a situation where Brandon Roy was trying to get out of a situation in Portland that he didn't like and maybe pick his own situation. It was nothing like that. Folks, when he retired last year, he had $63 million left on his contract with the Portland Trail Blazers that he forfeited. $63 million this guy had left on his contract. Today it was announced he signed a 2-year, $10.4 million contract with Minnesota. So he'll be playing in the NBA instead of with a contract that pays him a guaranteed $63 million. His contract is going to pay him a guaranteed $10 million. That is what you call a horrible business decision. Some advisor or somebody should have shook him by the shoulders and say, hey man, sit a year out. In the NBA, they're stuck with your salary anyway, so they probably wouldn't have cut Brandon Roy anyway. He would just sit there on the bench in a suit for a year. Should have had somebody get a hold of him, I think, and tell him that.
Hang on 1 second.
Sure sacrificed a large chunk of change. But he's back with Minnesota, and if he's even half of what he used to be, I mean, Minnesota, they got something going up there. Ricky Rubio, Kevin Love, now Brandon Roy, also signed Nicholas Batum, young Frenchman who also played at Portland. Batum, a young guy, gets up and down the floor, plays defense. Anyway, a couple of minutes left in the show. We are going to take a call. We have Joe on the line. Joe, you're on the Social Gambler Radio Hour. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. Thanks, John. Enjoying the show as always. I was just wondering, have you heard anything new on Howard and where he might end up? I know there's been a lot of things going on in the NBA, and it's hard to keep up with, but I'm a big Orlando fan, and I'm just hate to see Howard go, but I didn't know if you heard anything or knew where he might end up.
Well, it's a good question, Joe, and sorry to burst your bubbles, an Orlando fan, unless maybe you've already turned on him, but I do not expect him in Orlando, even though he's under contract another year, and the Magic have the option of keeping him and just letting him walk as a free agent. I don't think they're going to do that. They're going to make sure they get something for him. We've heard the deals rumored with the New Jersey Nets, where the Nets are offering Brooke Lopez, Chris Humphries, the guy who married Kim Kardashian, and 3 first-round draft picks for Howard. Apparently, and I say apparently, if you believe the reports on sites like ESPN, Fox Sports, CBS Sports, Orlando Magic general manager Rob Hennigan is more interested in dealing with the Los Angeles Lakers because they have a commodity, that commodity being Andrew Bynum, that Hennigan is interested in. Bynum, physically is the closest thing the NBA has to Dwight Howard, and I guess they feel like if they don't have Howard, they could at least have Bynum, and that would be okay. Now, are the Lakers interested in that? Will that be able to happen? I'm not sure. In my opinion, you ask my opinion, the dark horse team here is the Dallas Mavericks. Mark Cuban was beaten out for the services of Darren Williams. You know, he always likes to make a splash. I'm sure he doesn't like his team maybe fading to irrelevance. They lost Jason Terry also. Dwight Howard, that's a spot. Maybe Cuban feels like he'd convince Howard to stay there. So look out for the Mavericks. Maybe. I mean, that's just me guessing.
Right. Well, listen, thanks for your opinion on that, and enjoying the show as always. Take care, and I hope you enjoy the Serena match this weekend. Take care.
Yeah, Joe giving me a little hard time about the Serena match. I appreciate it, Joe. Thanks a lot. I'll be enjoying it, but not in that way. Like I said, she doesn't float my boat. Excuse me. Haven't seen Radwanska. No comment on her. No comment on her. So maybe I'll see her for the first time in these finals. We're out of time today. We'll see you Monday at 4. Actually, Sunday at 10 on 1010. Then Monday at 4 for more of the Social Gambler Radio Hour.
Flagler